Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive? Today we're going to be talking about a Declaration of Interdependence. It's kind of like, the Declaration of Independence, but like for the 21st century. We'll be diving deep into Chapter 4, The Language of Reality. It's from the book, The Declaration of Interdependence, How We Can Live a Life of Love, Infinity, and Integrity by Terry Sanders and Chad Steele. So basically, we're going to be exploring how the words we use, like, literally shape the reality we live in.
It's funny. When I first heard about this Declaration of Interdependence, I immediately thought about how it changes the way we think about success. You know, like it's not saying that individual goals are bad, but it's more about realizing that we're all connected and that our well-being is tied to the well-being of like everyone else.
That's a really great point. It's like, what's that saying? A rising tide lifts all boats. But this chapter goes even deeper, right? It's saying that language isn't just about communication. It's actually constructing the reality we experience.
Yeah, exactly. That's why they call it the language of reality, because it's emphasizing how we're constantly communicating,
Yeah.
even when we don't realize it. And that shapes our beliefs and values. It's not just the words we say out loud, but also the like silent language of our thoughts and assumptions.
So it's almost like our thoughts are the blueprint and our words are the building materials for this house of reality.
Exactly. And just like a house, if it's built on a shaky foundation, it's not going to last.
Yeah.
Right? The authors introduced this concept called fractegrity. It might sound kind of complicated, but it's actually a pretty simple idea.
Okay, break it down for me. What is fractegrity?
So think about a fractal. It's a pattern that repeats itself at different scales. Well, fractegrity is like that. It means that integrity at the individual level, like being honest in our everyday interactions, that has a ripple effect outwards. It can impact our families, our communities, even our institutions. And it works in reverse, too. The integrity of those larger systems, like our government or the media, that impacts us as individuals as well.
That's interesting. So it's like we're all little pieces of this giant interconnected puzzle.
Exactly. And the book uses this brilliant analogy to explain fractegrity, the story of the three little pigs. Remember how each pig builds a house out of different material?
Oh, yeah, of course. The straw house, the stick house, and the brick house. And then the big bad wolf comes along.
Exactly. The wolf represents the challenges we face in life, right? Now, here's where it gets interesting. The authors connect those building materials to the words we use.
Okay, so flimsy words like empty promises or lies, those are like straw and sticks. They might look good at first, but they can't handle any real pressure.
Right. They lack substance and integrity. On the other hand, words that are honest and true, words that are backed up by facts and evidence, those are like bricks. They create a solid foundation that can weather any storm.
That reminds me of another story, the one about the wise and foolish builders. One built his house on a rock, the other on sand.
Oh yeah, great connection. Both stories highlight the same thing. The strength of our foundation determines how resilient we are.
So if we want to build a life that can withstand the wolves of life, we need to use strong, honest words as our building blocks.
Exactly. It's about building that house of words with integrity.
Speaking of choosing our words carefully, it reminds me of the Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. He talks about how being impeccable with your word is like the key to personal freedom and creating positive change in the world.
Absolutely. The four agreements fit perfectly with the idea of fractegrity. For example, be impeccable with your word. It's all about using language consciously and truthfully. Building your house with those sturdy bricks, not flimsy straw.
Right, right. And don't take anything personally. That can help us stay calm in tough situations when we might want to lash out. It encourages us to choose words that build understanding rather than fueling the conflict.
Exactly. Responding thoughtfully, not just reacting impulsively, especially when you're facing those big bad wolf moments.
Don't make assumptions is another big one. So much conflict comes from misunderstandings. Choosing words that clarify and seek understanding can prevent so much drama.
Couldn't agree more. And that ties into the core message of the Declaration of Interdependence, fostering deeper connection and understanding, even when we have different opinions.
And then there's always do your best, which reminds us that, like, building a house of words with integrity, it's an ongoing process, right? We're not going to be perfect all the time, but we can try to approach every interaction with honesty and intention.
It's about progress, not perfection. And that effort in itself aligns with the Declaration's call for responsible action, within our interconnected world.
But here's where things get a little tricky. The book argues that even though truth exists objectively, language can either obscure it or amplify it. It's like language can be used for deception or for enlightenment.
Right. It's fascinating. It shows us that words have power, right? We can use them to manipulate or mislead, or we can use them to illuminate the truth and inspire positive change. Think about how propaganda uses language to create this status quo of non-reality, a version of reality that serves a certain agenda, even if it's built on lies.
It's like they're building a house of cards hoping no one notices the shaky foundation. And unfortunately, we see this happening all the time.
Yeah, sadly. We see it in how language is used to demonize certain groups of people, to dismiss uncomfortable truths, to create fear and division. It's a reminder to be critical thinkers and to question the narratives we're being presented with.
It's like we need to develop a BS detector for language, to be careful about the information we consume and watch out for those who are trying to manipulate us with their words.
Absolutely. It's a call to be vigilant and to use our own voices to amplify truth and challenge those who are spreading misinformation.
And this connects back to that idea of fractegrity, right? If we want to live in a world where truth prevails, then each of us has a responsibility to speak and act with integrity. Because if we're not actively promoting truth, our silence can actually contribute to the spread of untruths.
Precisely. It's not enough to just avoid doing harm. We need to be actively promoting good.
So basically, we're all responsible for building a more truthful and honest world. It's like we're all part of this massive construction project. And language is our most powerful tool.
That's a great way to put it. And the Declaration of Interdependence offers a blueprint for how we can work together to create a world that's not only more just and equitable, but also more truthful and honest.
Now, this next idea is, like, mind-blowing. The book says that by changing our language, we can actually change the world around us. It sounds almost too good to be true.
It might sound idealistic, but the authors make a really strong case. Remember that feedback loop we talked about? Well, if we change the language we're putting into that loop, it makes sense that the output will change too. It starts with us as individuals, making conscious choices about the words we use.
So it's not just some feel-good concept. It's about recognizing that our words have a tangible impact on ourselves and the world.
Exactly. And that's where the book gets really practical. It goes beyond saying language is powerful and gives us concrete examples of how we can shift our language to create positive change, like choosing words that promote understanding, fostering empathy, and prioritizing our shared humanity.
It's like we're replacing the rotten wood in our house of words with sturdy bricks. Instead of reinforcing negative narratives, we're actively choosing words that build bridges and break down barriers.
Yes, it's about understanding the impact our words have and consciously choosing language that aligns with the world we want to create, a world where people feel seen, heard, and valued.
And that brings us to the heart of the Declaration of Interdependence, this idea of moving away from a me-first worldview and embracing a more interconnected perspective, where we understand our shared responsibility for the well-being of everyone and everything.
Right. It's about understanding that we're all in this together and that our actions, including the language we use, have ripple effects that go way beyond ourselves. It all comes back to fractegrity.
So are you saying that individual integrity, like being honest in our everyday conversations, can actually contribute to solving global issues like climate change or social injustice?
That's exactly what the Declaration of Interdependence is proposing. It's a big vision, but I find it incredibly inspiring. It's about realizing that these huge problems are actually the result of millions of individual choices. And if we can shift our individual choices, even in small ways, it can have a ripple effect that creates massive change on a global scale.
It's like the Declaration of Interdependence is saying, hey, let's stop focusing on just building our own little houses and start working together to create a neighborhood where everyone can thrive.
That's a great analogy. And that shift in perspective can change how we define success. It's not just about individual achievement anymore. It's about creating a world where everyone has the opportunity to flourish.
That's a really powerful idea. Imagine a world where we measure progress not just by, like, economic growth, but also by things like well-being, sustainability, and social justice.
Exactly. That's the kind of transformation the Declaration of Interdependence is talking about. It's about recognizing that true success is collective, not just individual.
And this whole idea of shared responsibility is pretty powerful, too. I mean, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by all the challenges facing our world, but the Declaration of Interdependence reminds us that we're not powerless. We all have a role to play.
Right. It's about recognizing that we each have a sphere of influence, no matter how big or small, and that our actions within that sphere have a ripple effect.
I love that. It's empowering to think that we don't have to be like a superhero or a world leader to make a difference. We can start right here, right now, by being mindful of the words we use and the choices we make.
That's the beauty of it. It's not about waiting for someone else to fix everything. It's about each of us taking ownership and responsibility for creating the change we want to see.
And it all starts with changing the way we talk about these issues. The book mentions how language can either perpetuate harmful stereotypes and prejudices, or it can challenge them. It's like our words have the power to either reinforce those old, crumbling structures or build something new and more equitable.
Such a powerful image. It reminds me of a quote from the book, "The words we use create the world we live in." So if we want a world that is more just, more compassionate, more sustainable, we need to start using language that reflects those values.
It really makes you realize how much of a difference a simple change in vocabulary can make. Like, instead of talking about helping the less fortunate, we can talk about creating systems that empower everyone to thrive. Or instead of debating whether climate change is real, we can focus on finding solutions that ensure a healthy planet for future generations.
Exactly. It's about shifting from a language of scarcity and division to a language of abundance and unity. It's about recognizing that we're all in this together and that we have a shared responsibility to care for each other and for our planet.
So how do we put all of this into practice? I mean, the Declaration of Interdependence paints this like big, beautiful vision, but how do we actually translate that into concrete actions?
Well, the book doesn't give us a step-by-step guide, but it does offer some practical principles that we can apply in our own lives. One of the key takeaways is the importance of cultivating a culture of truth and integrity. This means being honest in our interactions, even when it's difficult. It means seeking out accurate information and challenging misinformation. And it means holding ourselves and others accountable for upholding ethical standards.
So it sounds like it starts with becoming more aware of the language we're using and the impact it has. Are we choosing words that build people up or tear them down? Are we using language that connects us or divides us?
Those are great questions to ask ourselves. Another important step is to be willing to challenge our own assumptions and biases. We all have them, and they often come out in the language we use, even without us realizing it. So it's important to be mindful of the words we choose and be open to learning from others, especially those who have different experiences and perspectives than our own.
It's about recognizing that we all have blind spots and being willing to have those blind spots, like illuminated by others. And that takes a willingness to listen with an open mind and heart, even when it's uncomfortable.
Absolutely. And that connects back to what the Declaration emphasizes, dialogue and open communication. It's not about winning arguments or proving someone wrong. It's about seeking understanding and finding common ground.
It's like we're trading in those verbal weapons, the ones we use to defend our egos. And instead, we're picking up tools for building bridges of understanding.
Beautifully said. The book encourages us to approach disagreements with curiosity rather than judgment. It's about asking questions, seeking clarification, and trying to see the world from another person's perspective.
That can be so challenging, though, especially these days, when it feels like everyone's so quick to judge and condemn.
It is challenging,
Yeah.
but it's also incredibly rewarding when we can move past those knee-jerk reactions and approach disagreements with genuine curiosity. It opens up the possibility for real connection and understanding. And that's where the magic happens.
It's like we're taking those potential battlegrounds
Right.
and turning them into fertile ground for growth and transformation.
Exactly. And that's what makes the Declaration of Interdependence so radical and so hopeful. It offers a way to move beyond all the divisive rhetoric and polarization and to create a world where we can disagree respectfully, learn from each other, and work together to create a better future.
This is seriously making me rethink how I communicate. Like you said earlier, our words create the world we live in. And I definitely want to be building a world based on connection and collaboration, not conflict and division.
It's a world we can all help create. Remember that idea of fractegrity? Well, the Declaration of Interdependence takes it to a global scale. It's about recognizing that the health and well-being of our planet and everyone on it are interconnected.
So we're not just talking about individual well-being anymore. We're talking about the well-being of the entire planet.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
this changes how we think about global challenges, like climate change, poverty, and conflict. These aren't someone else's problems. They're our problems. And they need a global response, a unified effort to create a more sustainable and just world for everyone.
You know, when you put it like that, it's almost overwhelming. It's hard enough to get people to agree on, like, what to have for dinner, let alone solve global problems.
I hear you. It's definitely a tall order. But the Declaration of Interdependence gives us a powerful vision for how we can get there. It starts with embracing our shared humanity and recognizing that we're all on the same team, no matter our differences.
That's a beautiful sentiment. But how do we move from sentiment to action? How do we actually start building this more unified, more equitable world?
It starts with each of us, right here, right now. It starts with the choices we make, the words we use, the actions we take. And it's easy to feel like our individual efforts are too small to matter. But the Declaration reminds us that even the smallest acts of kindness, compassion, and integrity can have a ripple effect that goes far beyond ourselves.
Like the butterfly effect, right?
Mhm.
A butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil, and it causes a hurricane in Florida. Maybe a small act of kindness here can create a wave of compassion that spreads around the world.
Exactly. It's about believing that our actions matter and that we can be a force for positive change.
I love that. It's so easy to get caught up in all the negativity and cynicism we see. But the Declaration of Interdependence offers hope. It reminds us that we have the power to create a better world. And it starts with the words we choose and the actions we take.
It's a call to action, to be more mindful, more compassionate, and more committed to creating a world that reflects the best of who we are.
A world where truth, integrity, and love are the guiding principles, not just lofty ideals. I'm definitely ready to start building that world.
And remember, you're not alone. There are millions of people all over the world who are also committed to building this better world. And together, we can make it happen.
It's like we're all part of this massive construction project, and language is our most powerful tool.
And it's not just about building outward, it's about building inward too. Remember that analogy of the house? Well, the language we use also builds the house we live in internally, our mental and emotional landscape.
Oh, that's interesting. So if we want to live in a peaceful and joyful inner world, we need to choose words that create those conditions. It all comes back to personal integrity and how it ripples outward.
That's it. And that brings us to the potential impact of the Declaration. On an even grander scale, if we can shift our individual and collective language to embrace these principles of truth, integrity, and love, it could transform our relationship with the planet.
You're talking about environmental sustainability, how the Declaration can help us address the climate crisis
Yeah.
and other environmental challenges.
Exactly. The book emphasizes that embracing interdependence means recognizing that we're not separate from nature, we're part of it. And our language should reflect that.
So instead of talking about conquering nature or exploiting natural resources, we should be talking about living in harmony with nature and finding ways to thrive without destroying the planet.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that the well-being of the Earth is totally connected to our own well-being. Just like we choose words to create a healthy and supportive environment in our relationships, we need to choose words that create a healthy and sustainable environment for our planet.
And that takes us back to the core message of the Declaration. We're all interconnected. Our actions have consequences. And the language we use shapes the world we create, both for ourselves and for future generations.
It's a powerful and inspiring message, and I think it's essential for navigating the challenges and opportunities of the 21st century.
I totally agree. It's like the Declaration is giving us a roadmap for a more hopeful, more just, and more sustainable future. And even though the journey might be long and challenging, I believe that by embracing these principles and putting them into practice, we can create a world that's truly worthy of the name interdependent.
And a world where we can all thrive, both individually and collectively.
So we've talked about a lot in this deep dive: the power of language, fractegrity, and the potential of the Declaration of Interdependence to create a more just, sustainable, and interconnected world. But before we wrap up, I'd love to hear your final thoughts. What are some of the key takeaways you'll be taking from this conversation?
You know, for me, one of the biggest takeaways is that we're not just like passive recipients of language. We're active creators of it. And that means we have a responsibility to use language consciously
Yeah,
and intentionally.
I love that. It's like we're all holding these little paintbrushes, and the words we choose are the colors we use to paint our reality.
That's such a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And if we want to create a more beautiful world, we got to be mindful of the colors we're choosing. Another key takeaway for me is that integrity is contagious. When we speak and act with integrity, it inspires others to do the same.
Right, like that ripple effect we were talking about. Our actions, even the small ones, can have a huge impact, creating a wave of positive change.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the importance of individual action. The Declaration isn't just some abstract idea. It's a call to action for each of us to do our part in creating a better world.
So what are some practical things we can do to put these ideas into action?
Well, first, we can start paying more attention to the language we use every day. Are we choosing words that lift people up or tear them down? Are we using language that promotes understanding or creates division?
It's like doing a language audit, huh? Taking a closer look at the words we're using and asking, are these words creating the kind of world I want?
Exactly. Another thing we can do is be willing to challenge our own assumptions and biases. We all have them, and they often show up in the language we use, even when we don't realize it. So being mindful of our words
Yeah.
and being open to learning from others, especially those with different experiences, is so important.
Yeah, recognizing that we all have blind spots and being open to having those blind spots pointed out, that takes a lot of courage and a willingness to listen with an open mind and heart.
Absolutely. And it all goes back to what the Declaration emphasizes, dialogue and open communication. It's not about winning arguments or being right. It's about understanding and finding common ground.
Like putting down the verbal weapons we use to defend our egos and instead using tools that build bridges of understanding.
Yes, beautifully said. The book talks about approaching disagreements with curiosity instead of judgment, asking questions, seeking clarification, trying to see things from the other person's point of view.
That's hard though, isn't it? Especially now when everyone seems so quick to judge and criticize.
It is hard, but it's also so rewarding when we can move past those automatic reactions and approach disagreements with curiosity. It creates space for real connection, and that's when amazing things can happen.
Turning those battlegrounds into gardens, right?
Exactly, and that's what I find so powerful about the Declaration. It shows us a way to move past the division and polarization and create a world where we can disagree respectfully, learn from each other, and work together to build a better future.
You know, one of the things that really stands out to me about the Declaration is its focus on love. It's not just about changing our words or actions, it's about changing our hearts.
That's such an important point. It's something that often gets overlooked. We can talk about policies and systems all day long, but if we're not approaching these issues with love and compassion, real change won't happen.
It's like trying to build a house with no foundation. Love is the foundation for everything.
I completely agree. When we approach everything with love, ourselves, others, the world, everything changes.
Which brings us to that final thought-provoking question. If the language we use builds the house we live in, what kind of home are your words creating right now?
That's a great question for all of us to think about. Are we building a house of love and connection, or a house of fear and isolation?
The choice is ours, really. Every word, every action, it's all building something. So let's choose wisely and build something beautiful together.
And remember, it's never too late to start over. Even if we've been using the wrong materials, we can always choose to use stronger, more loving, more interconnected words to create the world we want.
That's a great reminder. It's never too late to start building the world we want to see. So to everyone listening, go out there and build something amazing. We'll see you on the next deep dive.